Okay, in this module, what I want to do is I want to specifically talk to you about visualizing and imagining and assuming the feelings. I talked about all this in the manual, but I want to just say this, and I feel like it's super important that you hear this firsthand and that you understand. There's never been one specific way that Jesus always did things. Like he healed in many different ways, right? The cool thing is Jesus works with you, right? It doesn't mean he doesn't sometimes stretch us outside of the box of our normal everyday thinking, but at the end of the day, he works with you. He works in terminologies and in ways that you will understand him, is what I'm trying to say. Like, he isn't trying to create a mystery. The mystery was revealed when we awaken from sin consciousness and we realize that Christ is our reality, right? So I just want to just say this. I've often asked people this question. I've said, has visualizing or assuming the feeling of stuff have these things always been the answer in every scenario, in every case? I mean, hands down, across the board. And ultimately, I get the answer of no. Like, it doesn't seem to work for every single thing. Now, I say that to say this. Why? Is because the tools I give you in these videos and the tools I give you in the book are practical tools. This is what's important. You have to understand your reference point in this whole thing. And that's the Spirit of Christ Jesus. That's Jesus. That's the Spirit of God, right? He is your reference point. He is your starting place, right? He is the literal foundation. Jesus is the starting line. Jesus is your ground zero. The fullness of all the Godhead, the fullness of all the power by God was all put into Jesus, right? And Jesus is now in you and me, meaning there is no other foundation other than Jesus Christ. There's no other reality or perspective outside of Jesus for you and I. Jesus is your ground zero. So this is what's critical to understand in this whole thing that I want you to capture is I'm giving you practical tools in this manual and in these videos. These are exactly that, tools. I want you to understand gifts of the Spirit are tools. Fruits of the Spirit are tools. And they are all fruits that manifest the root. Okay? Gifts are gifts of the Spirit, meaning the gifts manifest the Spirit. They're all in one Spirit. So when I say Jesus is your ground zero, your starting place, that means in all of your visualization or assumptions or contemplation or studying or just in decision making, and taking thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ, we have to always remember our ground floor, our reference point, which is the fullness of God, right? So when we're taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, what we're doing is we're taking every memory, past, present, and we take all future imaginations that we perceive that are linked to a past or present situation, because sometimes we can look in our past and we can see situations and we can be like, dang, that really wasn't very nice. That kind of was a sucky part of my life. Well, we have to create another reference point there. And the only way we can do that is to take that thought and bring it to your ground zero. Bring it into your foundation. Bring it into the foundation of Christ. Jesus. And take it from Christ Jesus as your reference point, as your starting line. And remember that we start from the winner's circle. So what happens is we take that memory and that thought and we bring it captive and we create the memory and a thought out of it from the perspective of Christ, right? So that anytime we look at something, we see something, we can see Jesus in it. See, Jesus is healing. So when you see Jesus in a painful memory, right, and you can find Jesus in it, it will heal that memory. Well, a healed memory or something that's happened in your life will end up ultimately bringing victory mentally for you. And when you experience mental victory, you're going to experience emotional, physical, across the board. Why? It's because Jesus simply is the reference point to every part of you, whether it's emotional, physical, spiritual, soulish, every single part of you. Jesus is the reference point. He is your starting line, right? And it's important that we take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. It's important we go there, guys. It's super important. Why? Is because if we don't take care of those memories, what will happen is those memories will create reference points that will end up causing you to have confusion and frustration. That'll get you looking from fear and faith. And you'll be trying to make a decision. Well, I've been there, I've done that, I've been hurt, right? Well, if you haven't dealt with that first, so I always want to challenge people to deal with you first. How do you do that? You take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. It's kind of like if you're correcting someone. Before you go correct them, it's important that you take time to make sure that you are engaging that situation from the heart of the Father, that you're not going with any bias in you, that you're able to bring those thoughts into your foundation, into your ground zero, get the moment to deal with it with Jesus, get his perspective and his thoughts and how he perceives and sees, and then we launch out and move from there, right? This helps clean up a lot of the mess that's going on in our minds. So I want you to understand this, guys. In everything that we do, we understand that all these things I talked about in the book, visualization, contemplation, right? The practical tips I give in you how to do all this stuff. This and get the assuming the feeling, all this. This is just to give your physical a spiritual experience, because it creates faith in your mind to be able to walk out every day, right? In your secret place. This is you experiencing God, that you're taking what you're experiencing to the world, right? But let me just say this, that you have to always remember that in a sense, you're always seeing everything from behind the 8 ball. Meaning this, you're learning to see from God's perspective towards what it is you're aiming at, right? So whether you're aiming through visualization, whether you're aiming for assumption, whether you're through affirmation, or confessing in agreement to the word, I always say this, you're confessing, and I think I spoke about this already in the module, but your confessing doesn't change God's mind. It simply changes your mind to align to God, right? Because God's mind's settled. He put everything in place for you to have victory. We're just aligning it to him, right? So we're seeing everything from behind the 8 ball, from the foundation, from the place that God sees and thinks and handles things from. And then from that place, you're beginning to aim your shot, and whatever tool you're doing it through, you're doing it through the reference point, the Spirit of God. Anything that does not have Jesus as the reference point, the Spirit of God as the reference point, will set you up to be tricked and deceived into another reference point, into another flesh, into another thought, into another spirit, into another gospel. Okay? So I just want to clean that up for you. Everything you do from the Spirit of God. All these things I've given you in this book are tools. And remember, there's a reference point to that tool, and you're learning to discern from the reference point to manifest the tool. God bless.